If you want to get better at drawing, then you have come to the right place. I am going to show you the path that has been explored for hundreds of years by thousands of artists who have come before you. The principles are universal and can be applied to all kinds of art. So even if you don't want a highly realistic finish, then the principles here will still be good to know. The first thing that you have to decide when you want to make more accurate and believable drawings are you an artist that draws accurately? That is an identity shift that you need to make within yourself, that you allow yourself to sit with things for longer to get them right. It will be pointless if the art you want to make doesn't require this strict control over drawing ability. Because in order to make interesting things, then you just need to be interested in the world. Academic art and study gives accuracy, but it does not replace the need for feelings and profound contemplation. You can make gorgeous things today without this training. With it, however, your standard is raised. And because your standard gets raised, that means that the things that you're aiming for will require more of you. The better you get, the more your art will take and pull you towards situations that you never expected, things that you now have to learn that you never knew you were interested in, but your art compels you forward. Everything you have in your dreams will not come true just by you imagining it. Even someone lying in the gutter can look up at the stars. What matters is not how high you can dream about all the art and beautiful things that you can manage to make. It is what standard are you willing to accept for yourself? Because you are not your greatest aspiration. You are your lowest standard that you can accept and tolerate. If you accept bad decision making, then you can absorb the guilt with excuses like, oh, it was not this time, I didn't feel like it, all these things. To have a standard, then you have to demand that patience of yourself. You have to live up to the artist that you are becoming, not who you are. The mind is a tool. It is either clogged and rusty and full of random stuff, or it is a clear funnel for your soul. There's no artist who should truly be afraid of their tools. They should not be afraid to know. Again, it is not who you are right now. It is who you are becoming. What you are about to learn is really meant to open your eyes. I'm going to quote Van Gogh from his own study of the exercises I'm about to show you in just a moment. The careful study, the constant and repeated drawings of Bargue's exercises has given me more insight into figure drawing. I've learned to measure and to see and to attempt the broad outlines, etc. So what used to seem to me desperately impossible is now gradually becoming possible. Thank God, he wrote in a letter to his brother Theo. That is the real crux of the matter. Everything that seemed desperately impossible is now gradually becoming possible. The study to become a better artist is to make your reality more possible. That everything that you imagine becomes more possible. That you can think, oh, of course I can do that. And then your standard is raised because now you have seen that this is possible. You will want to push even further. I want to share my favorite academic artist. His name is Adolf Menzel, and this is his sketchbook. He used art to study life his entire life. And in doing so, he left behind this wealth of work where he just, went about his day and he drew royalty, so a lot of them are royal peoples and persons. But what I really love from his sketchbooks is not the royal garbs and garments. It is these moments here where he is just outdoors walking and finding a little view, a little interesting point of view. And in looking at it, he just draws it. It is this study and interest in life that I think every artist needs to reinforce constantly and to protect, because it is, again, only when you are truly interested in the things that you draw, that you will draw them for what they truly are. And that is a rare thing, because what you'll see soon is that we don't really look at the world before our training of the arts. Just a few more sketches. I mean, there's thousands here, right? Workers, people cutting wood, more construction. And you can kind of see like what he's doing in the different times, right? We go through here. And these are quite dramatic, right? They're just his sketchbooks. So his entire life he studied, and he still kept going. And most artists that you know who get anywhere significant with their art, it's not because of any particular scheme. It is just that they were interested enough to want to try, interested enough to care. And in doing that careful drawing, and in doing those careful paintings, they had to grow. When you are studying to become better, the important is not to get to a point of making the perfect stroke the first time. This is a huge error that I see many beginners make, where they make one attempt, their first attempt, and then they judge their worth as a person based around that. Perfection is a commitment to refinement. If you can stay in the chaos of not knowing and really truly say, I don't know what's going on, then you can learn a lot and you can do a lot. You aren't truly a perfectionist just because you say you are, right? You are not saying, I'm a perfectionist, that's why I'm not doing these things. You are saying you're a perfectionist so that you never have to try again. Because if you can't make it right, then why would you bother at all? So please get used to the uncertainty. Look at this man, John Singer Sargent. He made incredible paintings. And the reason why they look so good was because he had a quality to him that allowed him to start over and over again. There are many stories and accounts of him just removing half the painting and then getting it right in a short order once he figured out what he was looking for. In this painting, Madame X, you can see even on the final canvas, there is a ton of changes. The head moves around, the arms go up and down, they change how she's holding her dress. And in doing so, in starting over, he gets closer to his successful vision every time. He might not have been able to see it from the very beginning, but as the drawing and the painting improves, the easier it is to make things better. Again, the better your drawing looks, the easier it is to then make good decisions within it. The system that I'm about to show you was explained perfectly by this man, Charles Bargue. He made some plates that we will explore in just a moment, where he basically intended for an artist to study them, and then in doing so, learn the academic eye, the way of seeing the world that would lead them to make good aesthetic choices. Every single drawing that you're about to see in these plates have the same idea. They are intended to raise your standard. They are intended to make you better. And so this is the very first plate, starting with drawing just eyes. And I think that's actually a very funny place to start, right? Because when you draw the eyes in your sketchbook, right, when you're just beginning, like that's the first thing. You start by drawing a little eye. And before we go into seeing like just why some of these decisions are made, I have to kind of explain to you about the eye. So when you think about the world, when you take something that is round and you're looking out to a round eyeball, in order for you to transform that onto a flat page, onto the flat canvas, you have to do some kind of projection. Mathematicians went mad trying to solve this problem for decades, for centuries, until it was proven impossible. And so this is what we have left, a projection. And you can look up map projections. You can look up different variations of how we can take a sphere and turn it so that it looks correct on a map. And so the Mercator projection, which is what you're looking at here, was intended so that these lines, they align with sea routes. so that when you are sailing here, if you go with these directions, you will land here. And then you can kind of like look at the map and you can find the right orientation. This makes sense because the only reason you really need a map of the world for many hundreds of years was if you were going to sail across it. Knowing that, we need to correct for this distortion, because when you are drawing from life or you're drawing just from your head or anything, you will make distorted ideas happen. And the way to kind of solve that is to have an accurate measurement. So what has been done in the past, for instance, like with something like sight size, which is not how the bark plates are intended to be studied, but it's usually how people explain it, is you would take a piece of string and you would put a weight on it. And then you would use this string to measure out the points that I'm about to explain to you. Now, in modern times, you can use technology, and the result is roughly the same. You get an accurate point where you can basically tell what is going on here. And so by making a measurement that goes across, I can actually go and tell what is happening here. Like if I align this point at the very top line to the top of the skeleton here, I can then go down and I can follow along the whole rib cage, and every single point that line interacts with will then be true. So ultimately, I'm still going to introduce distortion into my page. What matters is that these little lines are intended to qualify as many points as possible. So these crosses here, right? So this idea is you're meant to copy these drawings, and this is what you're meant to learn. The way you're supposed to approach this bark plate is you're supposed to draw the cross, and then you're meant to construct the drawing based around that cross. So you get a sense of this is the center, this is the intended center, and you can see there's a point here, and there's a point here in the eyelid, and here on the lower eyelid, that all converge towards this center. And so those are now known points, and you can find the direction between them. For instance, this point here and this point of the eyelid, that line will always be easy to spot because you have a reference that is correct. So what do I mean by points? So when you're thinking about drawing, usually you're thinking about like making big lines on the page, and you're thinking about how can you make it as expressive as possible. And oftentimes there is this idea that in order for you to make a beautiful stroke, it needs to be perfect in one go and it should explain everything, which usually means that you end up making a huge long brush stroke and you go, oh, this was not correct. Let me start over. And then you have to go all around and do all these things again, and you will try again and again. And it's very exhausting because every time, maybe I'm trying to get to a point here and over here, and I'm actually trying to hit a point that's like here. That's like where the measurement is. But because I haven't put this down, I cannot correct my drawing. And so the idea with saying look for the points rather than the lines is that when you have 2 points, right? If I go and I miss the mark, then I know, oh, I need to correct this by maybe 5 degrees. And then I can go and I can actually get it right. Or if I have placed my line in the wrong place, then I am aware of it in a way where I can go, oh, hang on, this is not the right place to put this mark. And so I can correct it and I go, oh, hang on, no, I missed it. So I try again. And now I can get it just right. What matters is that these points, when you are drawing them naturally, is that in order for you to make a curve, instead of trying to make a circle, right, and really try to get it right and say, oh my God, my circles are not working, then you simply go, what is the curvature of the surface? So if I'm trying to draw something like this, instead of trying to freehand it, right, I can just go, okay, what are the points necessary? So there might be a point here, and point here. And then as I come in and I actually make the lines, you see how when I turn my hand, so I just missed them just barely there, right? But now I can kind of correct back. Now I can come back in and I can correct them. I can come in and say, oh, here we are. And here we are. And I can just slowly get it right. And so this is a huge deal, because that is the main error that we make with our line drawings all the time, with our paintings all the time, is that we are so preoccupied with this like perfect stroke that we are not even thinking about what is the stroke, the brush stroke or the ink stroke supposed to actually say. And so by just saying, oh, hang on, I am making an error that I could fix by just thinking about the problem in a simpler way, right? If I think about it just as a series of small points, then I can get it right. I can just go and I can go for it. And even if I miss, you see how like this natural curvature that happens there, it's very satisfying. Most academic art, that curvature, and I will point it out in the drawings here, is built around this idea. So all of these drawings are intended just to be seen as a series of points. And this is not explained to you when you look at them just through images, but it's the fundamental lesson that Charles Bargue wanted you to learn. One was to really be able to see and to measure properly, and the other one was to entrain your academic eye, like to actually see the world as an artist. And that's where I think this study really becomes profound, because as an artist, you get to be interested in the world that no one else really gets to. You can just look at anything and find the exciting element in it. So when we look at these eyes here, you see how like they're all just very simple when you really look at them? Here we have a single point at the end of the eyelid. It goes all the way up here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so in drawing that, when you actually come to the final drawing, there'll be a slight curvature, and that will be enough. That will be enough. So you see how every single time he's making these rough drawings, the rough placement, it is not intended to be the final mark. It is intended to get the proportions correctly placed so that he can actually adjust them in a way where he's not committed to refining yet. So he can just go, oh, I made 4 points and they're wrong. I can see that they're wrong, but I imagine the brushstroke. And then you can correct. And it's much easier to move a single point around, both traditionally and digitally, than trying to correct a drawing that you've gone all the way in before you noticed you made a mistake. The second drawing is the same plate. You go, here we have some mouths. And all of these plates are intended to teach you to go from not having known anything about drawing really, to being able to draw people from real life. And so that's the first thing they do. You'll notice here on this plate on faces, and all these are famous sculptures. Like if you start looking at sculptures, you'll start recognizing them in the plates. It's like actually a really fun thing to notice. But you can see here again, a single mark, a cross, that gives the proportions of the entire drawing. And then look here what happens with his eye. Now, this is the line, right? He has 1, 2, 3, so that's 3 points. But the eye is a lot more varied in shape than that. But he needed these lines to get the accuracy of the measurement. And then afterwards, he made his smaller adjustments. So here you see the eyelid, instead of being a single line, it is adjusted. It is adjusted with just a single difference in direction. And all of that makes it feel so three-dimensional. It is really in the restraint that academic drawings become so special. They focus on having these clean, flat edges that you see all over them, but that they truly feel constructed and visually pleasing. The fourth plate, in this case, is one of ears. And you can see again how all of these complex measurements are broken down into just a few points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? 7. Just 7 points to make a quite complex curve. How all of these simple points, they lead to a simple decision. What is in light? What is being illuminated? And what is being obscured? What doesn't receive any light? And you can see how the focus is not in rendering the full form here. It is just showcasing what is the difference here. And here with a tiny bit of rendering to show the form change. Look here again. Simple line to mark the top of the foot, and then you add the complexity afterwards. First, you always go for the simplest solution of just saying, where is it? And then you can iterate. Then you can make it more exciting. If you're unwilling to do this step because, oh, it's so easy, then when you are sweating because you can't get this right, because you don't have the exact proportions, that's on you. That's your fault. The majority of problems that you're going to have in your drawings and paintings is because you skip steps. You go ahead without having the preparations necessary in order for you to do this thing that you are painting easily. Like, you're not afraid of painting the thing, you are just not prepared to do it. You are underprepared. Look at this foot again. A simple triangle measurement, right? 3 points. And then look at these toes. Just a simple flat line. 1, 2, 3. And that's enough to get the sense of it. Afterwards, you can add all this complexity. I'm not gonna go on every single drawing here, okay? There's a lot of plates here, but all of them are just so nice to look at because they have this clean, proportional sketch that comes before, which we normally don't have access to because these are often drawn in a soft line so that they may be erased out as the drawing progresses. Like, look at this hand. Look how the final, you know, it's almost so real that it's like coming out of the page. And yet it just started as this. Look how he didn't even draw the ulna here, right? The bone that sits at the wrist. Because the necessary proportion he was looking for was the bottom of the hand. And once he had that, then it's a simple measurement to figure out how far away does it go. And again, look, 1, 2, 3. 3 points to describe all of this. And then the proper overlap of the hand sitting on top of the wrist. But this is, it's just beautiful. So, arms. Yeah, I mean, these are so good looking. Like, I think just having these drawings nearby like makes you better just by having like a goal to go for. Like, you can really draw like this, that's possible, you can train to do this, and people have been doing it for hundreds of years. I think it's a very exciting idea to do something where you don't have to innovate on the path, you can just follow along. And I think you don't need to study all of these plates to learn these lessons I'm telling you, but I think it's good just to look at how you can see the evidence of how he's thinking in having these drawings laid out for us like this. How we're looking for the simple points, and then as they get drawn in, then there's more room for subtlety. But you can only get these subtle differences to showcase the different muscles underneath the skin if you are able to get the accurate measurement first, right? Notice again, this is one long stretch of line. But when he finally puts the muscles in, he can find these points, and then he can define how much it's going in and out of that shape. I could stare at these drawings all day. Like, they are really great. Every time, right? Every time you look at them, it's like major points, and then we go more towards rendering. I want to explain the next principle that you're meant to learn from the Charles Bargue plates, which is basically how to approach the rendering in a simple and straightforward way. And so, again, if you look here at this drawing, where you have all these major points, right? These major axes, where you can see that he's basically saying, wait, we get a color we can actually see on the camera. He's basically saying, this is the line, right? You see how nice and straight it goes? It goes all the way there. And by doing that, he basically says, that's the limit of the upper back. And when we look over here, you see like the same line, right? Like, what was necessary to do this, to make this bulge up? He needed to first know the point where it is and where it ends, and then he could actually go for it. Now, there's a bit more to it than just that, right? There's a few more smaller divots, smaller holes, but all of these are found in just making that simple line of saying that's the measurement. So every time you're looking at your drawings, try to really think of it as like, what is the simplest way of saying it? 1, 2. And then when you actually get around to it and you go, okay, now it's time for me to draw the shoulder, then that becomes natural. It's much easier to control your strokes this way. So what I really want to point out here is just how simple this statement is. It's really brilliant. Whoop! A single red line going all the way across the back. But what does that tell us? It tells us where all of these are. So we'll just grab this line. Right? All of this modeling sits on this line. So he has basically decided this is where there is the most interaction. This is where the form changes the most. And in doing so, he can go, okay, how does it then meet the form? And it basically creates a zigzag, right? You have these points that are created. They either meet the line or they go below. And these are now significantly easier to find, right? You have them here, you have them going down here, and here, and here, and here. Now, all this modeling, of course, is the muscles. But if you have tried to measure these first, and not like this, and said, this is what I'm looking for, by saying I'm going to find all these points here, what happens is that you end up making a little mistake here, and now this is too far down. But then when you try to measure the next point based on that, maybe you go all the way too far up, and you end up having a back that goes all crazy. Again, most of your drawing mistakes will be from actually measuring too finely, but without having done the job of actually going and saying, okay, what am I looking for? What am I measuring towards? And so by having that realization of saying, oh, actually, what I need to focus on is this big stroke, and saying, this is what I want, then you can move into a totally different category of with your work. Because this simple idea holds your knowledge on the page. And so you can just look at the drawing itself without having to worry about it anymore. You just have all the facts on the drawing. And so this rendering here, that is possible here, it's really good to understand, because what he is doing when he is saying, I'm going to render all these things out, is that he's just focusing on how much does this actually change. When you have something that is, say, a hard edge, let's do a hard edge here. This edge here, obviously this will feel like some kind of coin, right? Because we have the circumference, we have all these things going on, we have like something that feels like it's round. And what happens here is that all the clues that we have on this drawing is saying this is a hard edge. So if I am going in and I'm drawing it out, then everything still keeps saying this is a hard edge. But if I change and I say, actually, I want to make this a softer edge, now suddenly like the transition changes. What you have to think about when you have your shadows is just how are you defining things that are in the light, right? And how are you defining them towards things on the shadow? The hard edge that is created here is because this is a cast shadow. So it's this part of the back that's casting a shadow that's being hit here. And so what you end up reading is this is a form change. It goes all the way up around. And so that is something that we just naturally do. That's how we understand the world. If you can focus on how the form is changing, right? So here we have this. Obviously it feels like this. It goes down, up. And you think of it from this perspective, then rendering itself becomes much easier. Like if I take this example of the Bargue plate, right? And I want to add some environmental light to it. Say, for instance, like let's imagine that they are on a big grassy field, right? He's standing in, someone took the statue out on the lawn. If I go in here and I select, so I'm just going to select all the shadows with the color range select. Now I have a selection that basically says only the shadows are visible. So I can just paint and render in the shadows. And what happens is if I go in here and I just focus on the form, I can then just focus on the sculptural shape of it and render that out. And that immediately starts to read as form by saying what is pointing down and being lit by this grass, right? Again, here. Then that becomes more real because it starts belonging with the environment. The same thing goes for the back, right? We have that's Miss Dawes that's coming in here, and it will probably be lit like this. And so if I just erase that out, then it starts to read, because this is not facing downwards, right? This part of the obliques that sit above your hips. We know this is facing downwards now, and this is facing upwards. But because this is so accurate, now it's easy to say, hang on, actually, this is actually facing downwards. And so as the drawing is more and more precise, then it's easier to add more and more properly rendered elements to it. The same goes for skylight. If you have something that is like, say we have a blue sky above, then you might want to increase the, this like if you have a blue sky above, you might want to have this in the shadows. And so everything that's facing upwards, you would just render that out as if it's facing that way. And so anything that's facing downwards, now that doesn't get the sky. And every time you do this, then you're actually adding more and more reality, because now, like this area here, it stands out because it's not lit properly. And so that's what I mean when the more accurate your drawing is, the easier it will be for you to make it more correct, because this corrects that. Okay? I'm going to use this example from Dmitry Belyukin. And what I wanted to focus on is just how easy it is to look at the boy. Like nothing else is interesting, because everything else has basically no contrast compared to him. He's wearing an oversized shirt and he has these black pants on. So everything else just leads to him. And the way that he's gotten away with this in the shadows, for instance, is that everything that's facing upwards is blue and everything that's facing downwards has this grounded reflection. And so what you can kind of see is that the sphere, if you could call that, is at first it is just the color of the sky. But then if you go, okay, like this is actually, like how would I then render this? Okay, so if I take a sphere here and I go, this is my fabric color, and I want to render it like him, then I can just say, okay, first of all, I want to get my average. So I want to get my light in a way where I am not concerned with what the edge actually is. Again, if you come back to the lesson earlier, we're just looking for the broadest point possible in order for us to make an accurate judgment. So when I'm doing this, I can easily change the rendering of this sphere to change its placement in the scene. I can easily change the rendering of this sphere when it's like this to change its placement in the scene. If I do it like this, now it's in front of him because we're seeing the back of it. And if I'm doing it like this, then it's suddenly behind him because we're seeing a lot more of it. And so if I have it here, then I can go in and I can say, okay, so we kind of have all this light. And now I can just focus on this edge. And I can make it as soft as I need to in order to explain how fast this shape is turning away from the light. And if I do the same thing here with this skylight, right? Again, we're doing this. And I go, okay, everything that's facing upwards has this little blue color. Immediately, this sphere starts to feel a lot more grounded in this space. Because when I turn this layer off, you see how much difference that does? And so when you're rendering, that's the key. You just do it one at a time and you figure out like what is the shape, what is the form, and then you solve it one problem at a time. This is really the key of the academic approach. It is not to have some kind of insane mastery where you just get it right the first time. What you're doing is you're guaranteeing that you will get it right the first time. And so because you are no longer making easy, obvious mistakes because you're not skipping steps, then you can just keep working and you will not get discouraged because you are always preparing for the thing that you are about to do. And so the sphere, and if I turn off the layer, see how much of a difference that does? It's the same thing that you're being taught when you are trying to render these out. So the first time you do these Bargue plates, you're not trying to add any extra color. That's the whole point. You're not trying to overcomplicate the problem. You're just saying, okay, how do I go from that to that? And so when you are studying the Bargue plates, you might not necessarily even have to actually render out the full plate and start to sketch from scratch. Because we're working digitally, you can just come in here and you can go, okay, now I have this line of comparison, right? And go, okay, what would I do in order for me to arrive at this point? What do I need to explain in this figure in order for me to make this drawing possible? And so you can make your problem as easy as you want it to be so that you can actually learn something right now. Because the end goal is not to have this kind of look in your drawings. It is to be able to then go and use these same principles to draw the figure. The last set of plates that Charles Bargue shares are just these preliminary drawings of figures. And look how simple they are actually drawn. Like there's no face, there's no nothing. They're just meant to get you started. To give you an idea of what it requires for you to actually draw the figure. And so let's look at what they're actually focusing on. Let's go here. Simple lines and points. You can always come in and correct them later. And so all of the gesture drawing that is visible in here, that is the point. So that you slowly build towards this gradual increase in your accuracy by first starting with the points and then slowly adding more to the drawing and being more capable of correcting your drawing. Then as you add more complexity, then that complexity is carried by your simple system. So that you can always go back and say, oh, what am I actually trying to do? And really think about why you are stuck in your figure drawings. Why you feel like it's not going right. And look for if it's just a proportional problem. Because in many cases, when I'm giving feedback to students, what I will see is that it is just simple errors that because they weren't corrected, they start accumulating and the drawing becomes more and more distorted, or it becomes harder and harder to tell what's going on, that the first thing we have to correct is just figuring out where is the perspective, right? Where is the horizon line? And so in this case here, it's very clear where is the artist sitting and standing. And that is really one of the big points when you're discussing like figure drawings, is like how close do you even sit to the model? Because if you're very close, what you'll have to do is you'll have to look like this in order for you to make your drawing. And so the recommended distance is to be as far away so that you can see the person in their entirety, so that there's no distortion that is coming from your eyeball you have to correct for. You can just try to do it within the center. Just as how the Mercator production that we looked at earlier had the most distortion at the very top and the very bottom. Everything in the middle actually stays almost the same, and everything in the very middle basically doesn't change. So that's it. That's the end of an introduction to academic art. Just make simple points and then correct them and follow simple systems of measurement. And then as you draw the world, then you will learn more things about it. I wish that you will make an effort every day to learn as much as you can from the things that you love as you can. Because if art contains that energy, then you are guaranteed to love it if it contains that quality. And so this is not just limited to looking at the artists that you admire the most, but really everything in nature. Let me quote Bargue. First, one has to love nature with all one's heart and soul, and to be able to study and admire it for hours on end. Everything is in nature. A plant, a leaf, a blade of grass should be subject of infinite and fruitful meditations. For the artist, a cloud floating in the sky has a form, and the form affords him joy, helps him think. Reality is not ideal, but you can make it so. Bargue worked his entire life to transform people into angels. And you can see this model on the left was not a person who was necessarily happy to be there, but he turned this incredibly enduring woman into a goddess of spring. Look at the reference and look at what he did. This is not a mere measurement. It is being able to push at will. And that comes first from having an accurate depiction. He worked his entire life and did many wonderful paintings. But listen to this quote. Today I am more confident. My heart is open to hope. I have faith in myself. No, the laborious studies I work are not useless. The road I am following is a good one, and with the help of God, I shall achieve a glory, a just and pure glory. No matter how good you become, you will always find something about art that is completely foreign, completely new. And you will doubt yourself. You will feel afraid that this is like a weird thing to do and study and spend your time. And you'll also get bored. And both of those two things will make you stop. I hope that you can see the study of things around you as an invitation to just enjoy and like the world. And instead of thinking of this is a stepping stone of then I do the Bargue plates and then I graduate and then I never have to study again, but rather saying I'm going to be a person that studies the things that I like. And that might just be the Bargue plates for a while. I have taught people how to make art that they love for years. And I'm having a class that is available right now. You can join it. The link is in the description. I wish you the best of luck with your art. I wish you the best of luck with your process. And I really hope that you will think about all the exciting things that you just have around you in your room. And think of them as opportunities to learn more about them, that you draw them. Because that will be fun for you to have. And you will start creating these drawings that are belonging to you, that you care for. And because you care for them, then you will like both the drawings that you made of them, but also the thing more, be it your favorite items around your house or people that you actually care and love. And I hope that once you have your skills in order, that you will ask the people that you care about if they are willing to sit for you. And I really hope that you will ask them not to be on their phone or not to watch TV, because the act of sitting and being seen as you are being drawn is extremely powerful. We have so few opportunities to be truly seen by anyone else. And it is really in being seen and being seen for a while that we then get to see ourselves from a different perspective. At the end of a live drawing session, you always turn the page around and the model will look at 50 interpretations of themselves and not see themselves once. Because the image we have of ourselves is kept away. We think about how we look, but we're not really looking at how we look. We extend and distort. And in doing so, in making these little, micro, like in zooming in, and we find all the scars in our face and how something about our face just isn't right. And then you see a drawing, and it's like some person who just like, I just can't draw shoulders, man. That's really funny. I have known several women, especially, who in going to a life drawing have cured their own body dysmorphia because they got to see a person just stand there and exist, who maybe in their eyes didn't look as beautiful as them. But in being able to be present and to stand there in front of this crowd of artists who are just drawing them, they are a lot more at peace than them. And so that helped them actually change their mind about how they feel about themselves. When you draw anything, when you put your attention to it, you change that very thing itself. Maybe not necessarily in the real world, but how you feel about it. And so, with this as a stepping stone, this practice of study, I really wish you the best of luck. It has helped me so much to really look at my drawings from this perspective of simplicity, and I hope that it will help you as well. Good luck with your drawings.